At first, he might brush it off. Maybe he even feels a strange relief because your silence removes the pressure he never admitted weighed on him. He tells himself it's temporary, that you'll be back, you always were before. The days feel normal enough, and his world keeps moving as it always has. But underneath that calm, a seed of curiosity is already starting to take root. Why hasn't she reached out? As time passes, curiosity turns to confusion. He rechecks old messages, rereads moments where you laughed, where you cared, where you forgave. He starts to wonder if you really meant it when you said you were done, or if this is just another test. In the quiet moments late at night, early in the morning, his mind drifts back to you, not just to your words, but to your energy, your warmth, and the way your presence made his world feel softer. Days stretch into weeks, and silence starts to feel louder than anything you could have said. The absence he once thought would free him starts to weigh heavy. He catches himself glancing at his phone, half expecting your name to appear. Every notification brings a flicker of hope that fades into disappointment, and in those moments the bravado crumbles. He starts to see the space you used to fill the calm in your words, the kindness in your patience, the steady reassurance that someone truly cared. He might try to distract himself, telling himself stories to ease the sting, that you're probably still thinking about him, that you'll eventually break the silence, that he still matters as much to you as you did to him. But the longer you remain silent, the harder it becomes to cling to those stories. Doubt creeps in, quiet but insistent. What if she's really gone? What if she's not waiting this time? The days pile up and regret starts to whisper. He remembers moments he dismissed too quickly, times he should have reached back when you reached out, words left unsaid, apologies left unspoken. He begins to realize that what he lost wasn't just attention, it was love, steady and patient and real. Love that doesn't come around often, love that he may never feel again, and somewhere along the line, fear appears. Fear that your silence isn't anger but acceptance, that you're not punishing him, you're healing without him. Fear that your world is moving forward, lighter and freer, and that he's no longer a part of it, that maybe someone else will see what he failed to and cherish what he took for granted. Every day that passes, he sees more clearly what your presence truly meant. Not the convenience of your messages or the comfort of your affection, but the peace of knowing someone chose him fully, without question, without games. And the silence keeps showing him this truth over and over, until even his own excuses stop sounding convincing. He remembers your softness not because he feels guilty, but because he feels the emptiness left behind. He remembers your laughter because the days feel heavier without it. He remembers your patience because he can feel the weight of his own impatience now. And slowly, painfully, he realizes that what you offered was never ordinary, it was a gift he treated like it would always be there. But here's what matters most. What he thinks day by day doesn't define you anymore. Your silence was never about punishing him. It was about choosing your peace over explaining your worth. While he's left to face what your absence means, you're left to rediscover what your presence means for yourself. And sometimes, the most powerful thing isn't what he realizes day by day, but what you finally remember, that love never needed to chase to be real, and that your silence spoke what words never could. Over time, curiosity turns to doubt and regret, because silence has a way of growing louder the longer it lingers. In the beginning, he might brush off your distance as something temporary, a momentary shift that will eventually pass. Maybe you're just busy, maybe you're testing him, or maybe you're waiting for him to reach out first. At first, these thoughts soothe him. They make it easy to hold onto the idea that your absence doesn't really mean you're gone, just that you're on pause, waiting for him to play the next move. But as the days stretch into weeks, the comfort of those stories begins to fade. What starts as curiosity, wondering why you're silent, what you're thinking, whether you're as affected by the distance as he secretly is, begins to feel less like curiosity and more like an ache that keeps tugging at the edges of his mind. Each unanswered day adds weight to that ache, and the silence he thought he could handle starts to echo louder than he expected. He catches himself thinking back to small moments that didn't seem important at the time. The way you always knew when something was wrong, even when he didn't say it, the calm in your voice when his own words were sharp, the small messages that asked if he'd eaten, if he'd slept, if he'd made it home safely, the laughter you shared over nothing, the comfort of knowing there was someone who cared without needing a reason. At first, he remembers these moments with nostalgia, but soon, nostalgia sharpens into something harder to ignore: doubt. Doubt creeps in quietly, disguised as late night thoughts and questions he can't quite answer. Why hasn't she reached out? Why isn't she asking how I am? Is she really moving on? Has she finally decided she deserves better? Doubt doesn't speak loudly at first. It whispers in quiet moments, in the pauses between conversations with others, in the emptiness left by your silence. It makes him wonder if he misread your patience as weakness, your kindness as guarantee, your love as something he could always come back to. And with every passing day, those whispers grow bolder. Doubt feeds on what he starts to see more clearly in hindsight: the times you reached out first, the times you forgave too quickly, the way you stayed even when he pushed you away. He begins to realize he never fully met you halfway, maybe he didn't even try as hard as he told himself he did. And that realization sits heavy in his chest, harder to escape each day that you remain silent. Then regret steps in. Regret doesn't just remind him of what you did, it shows him what he didn't do, the messages he left unsent, the words he swallowed instead of speaking, the moments he chose pride over honesty. Regret plays those memories on a loop, the arguments where he could have chosen softness, the apologies he could have offered, the times he could have simply shown up and didn't. And regret has a cruel honesty to it. It doesn't hide behind excuses. It shows him plainly that while you were giving, he was taking. And now, with you gone, there's nothing left to take and no promise it will ever come back. Regret grows stronger when he starts to see you not just as the one who loved him, but as someone who finally chose yourself. Your silence begins to look less like punishment and more like freedom. And what stings most is the thought that maybe you're happier now, that maybe your laughter is lighter, your heart is calmer, and your life feels fuller without the weight of waiting for him to change. Regret shows him that what he thought was guaranteed was actually something you chose every day until you stopped choosing it. Curiosity is a question: does she still care? Doubt is the answer creeping in: maybe she doesn't. And regret is the truth that follows: she cared more than I ever admitted, and now it might be too late. It's a quiet unraveling of certainty, a slow realization that love doesn't stay where it isn't honored, and that silence sometimes means goodbye in the most final way. And while he wrestles with curiosity, doubt, and regret, your silence stands unchanged. It doesn't explain, it doesn't argue, it doesn't soften the truth. And in that silence, he's left to face the hardest question of all: what if she really isn't coming back? And the answer he fears most isn't that you're gone, it's that you've finally realized you deserve so much more. Over time, curiosity turns to doubt and regret because silence isn't something that stays still. It grows, deepens, and begins to ask its own questions when words no longer do. At first, when you go quiet, he wonders. It's a light sort of wondering, almost dismissive, cushioned by the belief that your silence won't last. Maybe you're upset, maybe you're giving him space, Or maybe this is just your way of making him notice you again. He leans on the comfort of your history, the times you always came back, the times you reached out first, the times you broke your own heart just to keep the connection alive. In those first days, he's more curious than concerned. He might even find relief in the quiet, mistaking your absence for a pause rather than a decision. He assumes this space is temporary, something that will eventually be filled by your words, your apologies, or your soft forgiveness. In his mind, you've always been there, always returned, always held the door open. Why should now be any different? Curiosity keeps him calm. It tells him that he's still in control of the story, but silence has a way of changing its shape. What began as curiosity slowly turns into something heavier. He starts to notice the difference your absence makes, the empty notifications, the mornings without your good wishes, the nights without your gentle check-ins. Small gaps at first, like tiny cracks in certainty, but each day they widen, and curiosity, that gentle, almost casual wondering, shifts to doubt. Doubt is quieter but sharper. It doesn't ask playful questions. It plants seeds that won't stop growing. What if this isn't a pause? What if this time she really means it? What if I pushed too far? Doubt forces him to remember the moments he buried under excuses, when you asked for more and he shrugged it off, when you cried and he looked away, when you offered love and he answered with silence. Doubt doesn't let him hide behind the belief that you'll always come back. It whispers that maybe you won't. The longer your silence lasts, the louder doubt becomes. It plays back the memories he ignored, not just the good ones, but the ones stained with neglect and selfishness. It makes him replay old conversations, looking for signs he missed, words you left unsaid, truths you might have swallowed. Doubt makes him see that your patience wasn't endless, and your love wasn't unconditional in the way he believed it was. He starts to see that you were strong enough to stay, but maybe now you're strong enough to leave. And once doubt has taken root, regret isn't far behind. Regret is heavier than curiosity and crueler than doubt, because it comes with memory that doesn't flatter him. Regret drags him back to the nights you stayed up waiting for replies that never came, the times you forgave words that cut deep, the hope in your eyes that he kept disappointing. Regret shows him not just what he lost, but what he wasted. It forces him to face the truth that you loved him deeply, purely, and without games, and he treated that love like something guaranteed, something that could be paused and resumed at will. Regret brings honesty. He remembers how he took your softness for granted, how he misread your silence in arguments as acceptance, and how he mistook your kindness for weakness. He starts to see that you didn't leave because you stopped loving him. You left because you finally started loving yourself. And regret is cruelest when it dawns on him that your silence isn't punishment, it's freedom, that you may have finally discovered peace he never offered, and that you might never choose to return to the place where your love felt small and undervalued. Curiosity asks, will she come back? Doubt answers, maybe not. Regret confirms, she shouldn't have had to leave to be seen. And in that quiet space where your words used to live, he realizes what he refused to see all along, that love isn't proven by someone staying no matter what. It's honored when someone leaves to protect the part of themselves you kept breaking. While he sits with regret, your silence keeps speaking. It says more than words could ever say, that your worth was never his to discover at the last moment. It was always yours to claim, with or without him. And that truth, once seen, is something he can't unsee, no matter how late it arrived. Silence reveals what words can't, because words, as honest as they may be, often get tangled in emotion, pride, and fear. Words can be softened to protect someone else's feelings, sharpened to defend ourselves, or twisted to keep hope alive even when it shouldn't be. But silence carries no such mask. It doesn't try to explain, convince, or plead. It simply exists raw and unedited, and in that space, truths emerge that were hidden beneath conversations, arguments, and apologies. In silence, he starts to see the difference between your presence and your patience. While you were there, your words made it easy to overlook your pain. You forgave with soft explanations. You argued but ended every fight with love. Even your hurt was wrapped in kindness, your disappointment cushioned by hope. But when the words stop, there's nothing left to soften the truth. You're gone, and you chose to be, and that choice speaks louder than anything you could have said. Without your words filling the gaps, he's left with the reality of what was. Silence makes him notice what your presence used to hide the imbalance, the moments he failed to meet you where you stood, the times he mistook your loyalty for something that could never be lost. Words can be ignored, especially when they come from someone who loves us enough to keep trying. Silence can't be ignored because it's no longer asking to be heard. It's showing what happens when you stop trying. The days grow heavier in your absence, not because he doesn't know what you'd say, but because he knows exactly what you won't say anymore. No reassurance, no forgiveness, no soft words late at night reminding him that he's loved despite his flaws. Silence reveals that love was never meant to be one-sided, that even the most patient heart can grow tired, and that staying silent doesn't mean you don't care. Sometimes it means you care too much about yourself to keep speaking to someone who refuses to listen. It isn't just about what he realizes, though. Silence reveals truths to you, too. When you stop explaining your pain, you see how deep it truly runs. When you stop defending your love, you see how many times you defended someone else's choices instead of your own needs. Silence shows you the moments you made excuses for words that cut too deep, the times you accepted less because you hoped they would see how much you gave, and it shows you how heavy it was to always be the one to speak, to fix, to heal. Silence becomes a mirror. For him, it reflects the gap left by your absence, the laughter, warmth, and steady presence that once felt so certain. For you, it reflects the part of you that was hidden under your words, the strength to walk away, the courage to choose peace over familiar pain, and the quiet understanding that you can love someone deeply and still know they're not right for you. Over time, silence begins to say what words never could. That love isn't proven by how loudly you fight for it, but by how calmly you're willing to let go when it stops being returned. It reveals that staying isn't always a sign of strength, and leaving isn't always a sign of giving up. Sometimes it's the most honest choice you can make. What makes silence powerful isn't its emptiness, but what it forces both hearts to face. It brings out regret in the one who let love slip away. It brings out clarity in the one who carried the weight of trying to save what was already breaking. It shows that real love can't be begged for, argued into existence, or guilted into staying. It has to be chosen freely and consistently by both. And when the urge comes to break the silence, to reach out, to explain just one more time, to see if maybe this time they'll understand, silence reminds you why you stepped back. Because the truth it reveals isn't meant to punish them, it's meant to free you. It shows you that your voice is valuable, but it shouldn't have to be used to keep proving your worth. And it teaches them that love offered so freely isn't something they can take and return to at will. Silence says what love couldn't say out loud, that your heart was never the problem. And in its quiet, both of you finally see the truth that words could only circle around, that sometimes the loudest, most loving thing you can do is simply walk away. Fear begins to surface quietly, almost unnoticed at first. It starts as a passing thought in the middle of the day, a flicker of discomfort he quickly pushes aside. At the beginning, he convinces himself that your silence is temporary, that it's a momentary break, that soon enough you'll reach out like you always did. He leans on the comfort of old patterns, the certainty that your love was patient enough to wait and forgiving enough to return. But as each day passes and nothing changes, the certainty starts to crack, and in those cracks, fear begins to grow. Fear doesn't announce itself loudly. It creeps in during quiet moments when he wakes up and realizes there's still no message from you. When he scrolls through old conversations and sees your words frozen in time, or when he catches himself thinking of you without meaning to. It's in those unguarded moments that fear finds its way in. What if this time is truly different? What if you're not just silent but gone? What if you've stopped waiting and started healing? As the days stretch on, fear becomes harder to ignore. It shows up as questions he can't answer with the certainty he once had. What if you meant it when you said you couldn't keep doing this? What if your silence isn't anger or stubbornness but acceptance? What if you're not trying to teach him a lesson, but have finally chosen peace over hope? Fear makes him replay old moments, looking for signs he dismissed. The tiredness in your voice, the moments your smile didn't quite reach your eyes, the times you stopped arguing because you realized arguing wouldn't change anything. The thought that you might actually be letting go feels heavier than he expected. It shakes the quiet confidence he once had that your love was unshakable. Fear doesn't just show him the possibility of losing you. It makes him face the reality that he might already have. And in that space, he starts to see that your silence isn't about punishment, it's about protection, a boundary you had to draw to keep your heart from breaking even more. Fear also forces him to look at himself, maybe for the first time without excuses. He starts to see his own choices not through the lens of justification, but through the lens of what they cost. The nights he stayed silent instead of calling, the times he chose pride over vulnerability, the moments he let your love feel one-sided because it was easier than admitting he was afraid of needing you too much. Fear shows him what he lost not because you stopped loving him, but because you started loving yourself more. It's not just the fear of losing you that unsettles him, it's the fear that someone else might see what he failed to see. That someone else might meet you where he never did, might hold your heart the way you always hoped he would. It's the realization that your laughter might be lighter with someone who doesn't make you question your worth, that your silence might mean you've outgrown him, not that you're waiting for him, and that thought cuts deeper than he expects. Fear also makes him remember the comfort your love gave him, the steady reassurance that no matter how messy life got, there was someone who saw the best in him. Without your words, your presence, your kindness, life feels colder. And the fear grows into something even sharper. What if he can't find that again? What if what you offered wasn't something anyone else will? What if the emptiness your absence created is something that won't be filled by anyone else? As fear settles deeper, it becomes harder to pretend. The excuses he once clung to feel hollow now. The idea that you'd always be there starts to look more like a story he told himself to avoid facing the truth. And that truth is simple but painful. Love, once taken for granted, doesn't always wait to be chosen again. Sometimes it leaves, quietly and finally. In the end, fear reveals what pride kept hidden, that he cared more than he showed, needed you more than he admitted, and believed in your love more than his silence ever confessed. But it also shows that your silence isn't meant to scare him, it's meant to free you. Because sometimes the deepest fear isn't that you'll come back changed, but that you won't come back at all, and that in your silence, you finally found the strength to walk away for good. He recognizes your love was rare not in the loud moments, but in the quiet weight of your absence that doesn't fade with time. It dawns on him slowly, almost reluctantly at first, as he finds himself replaying memories that once felt ordinary but now feel precious. Your words, your laughter, the way you listened when he stumbled over his own, the gentle questions you asked when he shut you out, these weren't just habits of someone who cared. They were signs of a love most people never experience even once. In the beginning, he likely saw your love as something natural, something that simply existed without conditions. It felt inevitable because you gave so openly, so consistently, that it never crossed his mind that it could end. Your patience became his shelter, and your forgiveness his safety net. And when it was there every day, it became easy for him to overlook how rare it truly was. But your silence stripped all of that away, and in the emptiness, he finally sees that what he thought was ordinary was actually extraordinary. He remembers the small ways you showed love that didn't demand recognition, the quiet messages to check on him, the notes you left behind just to make him smile, the moments you sat beside him in silence simply so he wouldn't feel alone. These weren't grand gestures meant to impress. They were reflections of a heart that chose him again and again, even when he made it hard. And now, in your silence, he realizes that love like that doesn't come around twice. What makes your love rare isn't just the kindness you offered, but the strength it took to keep offering it, even when you received so little in return. The strength it took to believe in someone who struggled to believe in himself. The grace to hope for better days without demanding them, and the courage to stay when staying meant swallowing your own hurt for the sake of what you shared. Looking back, he starts to understand that it wasn't your silence that required strength, it was your love itself. Your love was rare because it didn't ask for perfection. It didn't measure him against an impossible standard or keep score of his mistakes. It offered acceptance where he offered excuses, softness where he offered silence, and patience where he offered uncertainty. It took him time to realize that not everyone would see his flaws and still choose to stay. Not everyone would hold space for his fears without making them their own burden. It's in the moments he feels weakest that he understands your love's quiet power. The nights you stayed up just to listen to his worries, the days you celebrated his small victories as if they were your own, the way your faith in him never sounded like pressure but felt like freedom. These were gifts he never asked for but came to rely on, and now, in their absence, he recognizes just how precious they were. He also begins to see how rare it was that your love wasn't about possession or control. You didn't try to fix him, mold him, or force him into the person you wanted him to be. Instead, you loved the person he was, even when he struggled to love himself. And that kind of love, the kind that sees the darkness but still believes in the light, isn't something that can be replaced by someone new or found by searching. It's something you either receive by grace or miss forever. But what hits hardest is the realization that your love didn't end because it stopped existing. It ended because you chose to protect it and yourself from a place it was no longer valued. That your leaving wasn't proof that your love was weak, but that it was strong enough to know when to walk away. He starts to understand that real love doesn't stay where it's only wanted for comfort. It stays where it's met with effort, respect, and honesty. In this new clarity, he recognizes your love was never his to command. It was yours to give, and you gave it freely, fully, and with a vulnerability that few people dare to show. And what makes your love rare above all else is that even now, in your silence, it's not replaced by bitterness or resentment. It simply exists as a quiet truth that you loved deeply bravely, and beautifully, and that love will always remain rare, even if he finally sees it too late. Your silence is about choosing yourself, not about punishing him or making him wonder what went wrong. It isn't a game, a strategy, or a way to make him chase you. It's the quiet decision to stop fighting for someone else and start fighting for your own peace. Silence is not empty, it's filled with meaning, shaped by every moment you stayed when you were hurting, every time you forgave when it wasn't asked for, and every time you explained your worth to someone who didn't want to see it. Choosing yourself starts softly, almost invisibly, with small moments when you catch yourself thinking, "I can't keep doing this." It comes from exhaustion that runs deeper than tiredness and ache in your heart from loving someone who didn't show up the same way. It grows from the nights you spent replaying conversations in your mind, wondering what you could have said differently to make them see you, value you, or stay. But there comes a day when you wake up, and instead of planning what to say next, you say nothing. And in that nothing, you find a calm that feels both foreign and right. Silence becomes a boundary, a quiet but firm line between what you gave and what you refuse to keep giving. It says, "I will not argue for my worth. I will not beg to be chosen. I will not prove that I am enough," because you finally understand that love shouldn't need constant proof to exist. Your silence is not coldness, it's self-respect. It's the decision to stop speaking to someone who only heard what they wanted, and to save those words for someone who will truly listen. It's not that the feelings disappear overnight. You still miss them, still remember the softness of their voice, the moments that felt real, and the hope that things could have been different. But your silence honors the part of you that whispered, "I deserve better," even when you were too afraid to say it out loud. It protects that voice until it grows strong enough to guide you forward. Choosing yourself through silence isn't easy. It feels unnatural at first, especially when you've spent so long explaining, fixing, and trying. It feels like abandoning the love you built, but what you come to see is that you're not abandoning love, you're releasing what was hurting you. Silence doesn't erase the love you felt, it gives it back to you, so you can heal and decide where to place it next. In the quiet, you realize how loud your efforts had become, the constant questions, the hope hidden inside every message, the silent waiting for them to meet you halfway. And as those efforts fall away, you feel the weight lift. Slowly, you remember that your heart isn't small or needy, it's generous and brave. You remember the way you love, the kindness you bring, the way your presence softens a room, and you see clearly that someone who can't meet that with honesty and care isn't someone who deserves it. Your silence becomes a promise to yourself that you won't keep sacrificing your peace for someone else's comfort, that you won't stay quiet about what hurts just to avoid being alone, and that being alone isn't the worst thing staying somewhere you aren't truly valued is. Silence becomes the language of self-trust, the evidence that you finally believe what you always hoped they would see, that you were worthy all along. It's not about proving anything to them. Whether they notice or not isn't the point anymore. What matters is that you notice, that you see the strength it takes to step back, the courage it takes to face the ache of missing them, and the love it takes to choose yourself over the hope that they might change. Silence turns that hope inward into faith that you will heal, grow, and love again, this time without losing yourself. Your silence says what words never could: "I love you, but I love me more." And in that choice, you don't lose the part of you that loved them, you reclaim the part of you that kept trying to convince them. Choosing yourself isn't the end of love, it's the beginning of loving yourself the way you always deserved. And in that quiet, you become your own answer, your own peace, and your own strength. Your silence was never about him at all. It wasn't a tactic, a punishment, or a plea for him to notice what he failed to see. It was a turning point, the quiet, unwavering choice to finally see yourself, to honor your own heart instead of trying to prove its worth to someone else. It's in that silence that you discover your deepest truth. Love isn't meant to cost you your peace, your dignity, or your sense of self. By choosing to step back, you chose to step into your own strength, to reclaim your voice by deciding not to use it where it wouldn't be heard. And in doing so, you didn't lose anything that was truly meant for you. You simply made space for something better, a love that doesn't have to be chased, explained, or begged for, because the most powerful message you ever sent wasn't written in words. It was spoken in silence, the language of finally choosing yourself,